So, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers for having me. It's truly an honor to speak for you today. I would like to cover the topic of parental alienation syndrome, mainly focusing on legal and psychological issues on this regard. In the 21st century, the number of cases of both parents claiming custody of a child has increased significantly. In the event of divorce or separation, it is increasingly more common for both parents to seek custody of a child. This phenomenon should be prima facie evaluated on a good note and associated with the desire of responsible parents to take care of their own children. In the model case, such action creates an opportunity for children to meet their fundamental developmental needs, as Anna Błasiak and Ewa Dybowska note in article titled Parenting and its Influence on the Child Rearing Process. Quote, "Every child needs both loving parents who will bestow true affection and appreciation of the child, appreciate and accept him. This will make him feel needed, loved and wanted. The child himself seeks the love of his parents, expects help from them, and to provide him with peace and happiness. But on the other hand, the child is subject to the controlling role of his parents, who teach him to be disciplined, which allows him to create internal order and gives him a sense of security. Subtle relationships of dependence, independence, and internal interdependence are formed between parents and children, which are important for the child's future functioning and building relationships with others." End of quote. A complete and supportive family is fundamental for a child's proper development. It is the most important factor influencing his correct growth and upbringing. When the parents' life paths diverge, the involvement of both parents in the upbringing process creates an opportunity for children to have their needs met by both mother and father, which allows children to adapt more quickly to new parental conditions in a reconstructed family. Such model can work only if the adults are able to push aside the conflicts and unresolved wrongs, restraining them from putting the role of the parent first and developing the mother-child and father-child relationships. However, not everyone is able to simply put away the often emerging personal antipathy towards the former partner. Children become embroiled in their parents' private vendettas, becoming an instrument in a long-lasting game aimed towards proving the other parent's failure and boosting the first parent's self-esteem. In such cases, children are subjected to a specific kind of manipulation, the parental alienation. Parental alienation is a form of manipulation, a psychological game aimed at the repulsion of the victim parent by the child guided by manipulator parent. For the occurrence of above term, it is important that the minor shows certain symptoms of so-called parental alienation syndrome. Clearly distinguishing between the two terms, it should be pointed out that parental alienation refers to the influence of the parent towards the child, while parental alienation syndrome is a term for the effects of the above actions. The goal of the manipulator is to get the child to reject the victim, the second parent. The common motivation for such action may be the need to prove one's own worth to the other parent, to show that one is superior, to humiliate the other one, to win the battle of pride and ambition. In addition to personal conflicts between the parents, the fear of losing the influence over the child's upbringing is often raised. It is particularly strongly observed with fathers whose position in the custody cases is weaker. In practice, the courts often raise the argument that it is crucial for the minor to be raised with the mother, overshadowing the role of the father. Parents may also be motivated by the selfish desire to fulfill one's own unmet childhood needs for the contact with a caretaker, which in adult life leads to strong need for fulfilling the parental duties by such individual and meeting social norms of a good guardian. I am good parent because I fight for the child and try to actively raise him, one may say. It is worth noting that parents often act unconsciously or not fully aware of the consequences of their behavior. Justifying their actions by the child's welfare, alienating parents denigrate the other parent and bring false accusations towards him in the presence of a child. In fact, involving the minor in his or her own conflict. The minor adopting the language and mindset of the manipulator rejects the victim, his own mother or father, enacting the so-called independent thinker phenomenon, which is one of the symptoms of parental alienation syndrome. The minor claiming that the decision to reject the victim, the bad parental figure, is his own decision made independently and solely, actually represents the mindset of the manipulator, building up his own hatred towards the victim. A clear example of adopting the views of the manipulator is the child's use of vocabulary characteristic for an adult. Human reasoning is dialectical in nature, which in great simplification means that we speak like we think and we think like we speak. The words represent one's thought horizons. The child hearing and repeating certain phrases over time begins to adopt them as his own. After hearing accusations over and over again, the minor begins to speak of his father as an unemployed alcoholic who is good for nothing, or of his mother as a useless housewife who can't do anything right. I shouldn't stay with him or her, we hear. But we hear the repercussions of adult conflict spoken through the mouth of a manipulated child. Among the symptoms of parental alienation syndrome, Richard Gardner, an American expert witness in psychiatry, pointed out active denigration, falsely based accusations, lack of ambivalence, and clearly hostile attitude toward the denigrated guardian, taking side of the beloved parent regardless the objective circumstances, lack of guilt for accusing the other parent, replicating the arguments of beloved caregiver, and extending negativity for the rejected parents towards his or her distant family. Depending on the intensity, Gardner distinguished mild, moderate, and severe stages of parental alienation syndrome, where for the syndrome to take place, it is only necessary for some of the symptoms to occur, but not necessarily all of them. According to Gardner, the syndrome develops and takes shape under the influence of pressure and manipulation on the part of the parent who plays the primary role in parenting. From the child's point of view, the development of parental alienation syndrome is sparked by the desire to meet the expectations of the loved caregiver, a sick sense of loyalty towards him or her, and at the same time, a fear of losing the only support that child identifies with the manipulator parent. Children diagnosed with the parental alienation syndrome revealed greater timidity than the control group, less interest in gaining experiences, poorer relationships with peers, and in later development stages, the difficulties in problem solving and poor social adjustment, low self-confidence, behavioral disorders, poor relationships with their own family, and difficulties in adjusting to school conditions. Parental alienation underlies trauma and negative cognitive patterns which, untreated, affect every aspect of one's life. In addition to the usage of psychological manipulation methods, which are the most common forms of duress, parental alienation can manifest itself by preventing or obstructing the exercise of contact rights between the child and the other parent. Manipulative actions in this case take the form of physical compulsion aimed towards rights and freedoms of both the minor child and the other parent. Such far-reaching parental alienation creates in the child's mind belief that the alienating parent remains his or her entire world, with whom he or she identifies a sense of security and a happy life. Over time, the child becomes subordinated to the alienator by developing a strong sense of dependence with the caregiver. As a result, the sense of family identity is disrupted. As Dariusz Szczękowski points out in his article, The Influence of Parental Alienation on the Mental Condition of Children and Adolescents in Poland in Case of a Family Breakdown, quote, "In the deep stage of parental alienation, the child himself, at a certain specified age, most often above the age of 10 or earlier, without the participation of the alienating parent and his further manipulation, prolongs the alienation as an expression of his own free will, which is called secondary alienation. This is the most tragic stage of parental alienation, in which the child very often openly disregards the other parent and his family, or shows public hostility, contempt and hatred, often using vulgar vocabulary towards the other parent. The adolescent child is then a greater perpetrator of violence than of parental alienation towards the alienated parent than the original perpetrator, which is much more emotionally and psychologically devastating to the other parent, who often decides to take the most tragic step, which is suicide attempt. Extreme forms of parental alienation manifested by the direct interference with the contact rights between the child and parent have been regulated both by international law in cross-border cases and by domestic law acts. Thus, parental alienation taking the form of physical separation of a child from a parent should be considered an action that fulfills the conditions of Hungarian Criminal Code, Section C, Article 210. According to the experience of Richard Gardner, the parental alienation syndrome inventor, the norm for children of divorce was to continue to love both parents in spite of divorce and the passage of years. This finding was replicated by one of the first large-scale studies of divorce. With this background, Gardner became concerned in the early 80s about the increasing number of divorced children he was seeing, who, especially in the course of custody evaluations, presented as preoccupied with denigrating the other parent, sometimes to the point of expressing hatred towards a once loved parent. The concept of parental alienation syndrome remains heavily linked to the child custody litigation. Nowadays, however, the concept causes controversy. The scientific community has subjected parental alienation syndrome to criticism, accusing Gardner's research of lacking scientific evidence, simplicity, and exclusion of multiple factors that may contribute to parental alienation, family dysfunction, and a breakdown in attachment between a parent and a child. Furthermore, parental alienation syndrome has not been included in this DSM-5. Despite this, research on the above matter continues. In legal practice, the issue of parental alienation syndromes remains inconclusive. In 2021, the European Parliament has issued a resolution regarding the matter of parental alienation syndrome. The main concern that has been brought up by this act was common misuse and exploitation of presented concept by abusive fathers. According to the European Parliament, parental alienation syndrome is now being used by abusive fathers to refute arguments raised by abused mothers aiming towards protect their children. The resolution describes the parental alienation syndrome as an unproven psychological theory that is now operating in court practice as a discriminatory tool against women fighting with abusive fathers. Similar observations were made also by Richard Gardner in the United States, noting that in the early 2000s, there was a significant increase in number of parental alienation syndrome cases, which was undoubtedly linked to the publication of his research findings and increased public awareness of the issue at hand. The misuse of the concept of parental alienations syndrome in court practice based on the above considerations and the cited sources seems to be a fact. But the presented approach divides parental alienation syndrome, which refers to occurrence of certain symptoms, from the parental alienation itself, defined as parents' active behavior aimed at alienating their children from the other parent. Such concept allows courts to statewise to base their orders upon observable facts, behaviors, without the need to referring to psychological concepts. The worsening mental condition of the younger generation indicates the need to protect children from psychological and physical abuse. Every family should strive to preserve its integrity, as it is one of the basic values that guarantees its proper functioning. In the event that, due to the growing conflict between the parents, this proves to be impossible, the law should safeguard the legal situation of the child, striving to ensure optimal developmental conditions. The legal system balances here on a thin line between the need to protect the minor and to provide the right to privacy of family life. Regardless of the theoretical and terminological disputes in the scientific community, the deteriorating position of the child in divorce cases remains a fact. The observed polarization of statements taken by the scientific community, as well as the increasing topicality of issue, formulates the demand for further research in this area. To conclude the presented consideration, it is worth emphasizing that the problem of child manipulation in conflict between parents is a highly complex and sensitive issue that requires an individual approach in each case, and each such case should be decided separately by taking into account the welfare of the child as the supreme value. The suffering of minors is not just a theoretical concept. Thank you very much.